you as a brand and you as a person should be showing up at the moments that matter for them. So when they're not posting about you, are you liking their content? Are you commenting? If they've got married, are you saying congratulations? Are you responding to the moments which aren't about you?
Have you ever wondered why some brands grow exponentially, building legions of passionate fans that live and die by their logos, and some, well, don't? I do, all the time, and that's probably because I'm a massive brand nerd, but I believe there's a secret sauce at the core of every remarkable brand, a formula that sparks the growth of passionate communities of superfans, building a business and a reputation that will last for years to come. My name is Paul Archer, and I'm a specialist in brand advocacy and word of mouth, having consulted for hundreds of brands on a topic.
Hey, it's Verity here, your co-host of the Building Brand Advocacy podcast.
In this podcast, we tap into the greatest marketing minds in the world as they share the exact tactics and strategies used to build the world's greatest brands, dropping actionable insights every brand builder can apply.
We've got some incredible guests coming up, sharing insights and tips that can truly shift the marketing landscape. If you want to be the first to hear, make sure you hit that follow button. The more people following the show, the bigger and better we can make it. So if you're loving what you hear, don't forget to follow and spread the word. Thanks again for listening. It really means a lot. I hope you enjoy this next episode.
It's time to learn and build brand advocacy.
Hello and welcome to Building Brand Advocacy. Today I am joined by the incredibly talented brand and marketing consultant, Coryn. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Coryn, you've worked across some really impressive brands. Do you want to just give us a little insight into your career before we get stuck in?
Yeah, of course. So I have been in beauty for about, a decade now, just over. So I started, if you can remember way back when, the subscription boxes of Glossybox and Birchbox. And then I moved over to Charlotte Tilbury, where I managed colour in their global brand marketing team. So did launches like Pillow Talk mascara and airbrush bronzer. I then moved over to flannels and launched beauty with them. It was a whole new department for them. And then more recently have been at VIEVE as the head of brand marketing. And then 6 months ago, almost to the day I worked out earlier, I decided to go freelance. So I am now a brand and marketing consultant for different brands.
Oh, wow. That's super impressive. A big move as well to go freelance. So yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been the best 6 months. Haven't looked back, which is a good thing. I love working in-house, but it's been a new set of skills to apply my years of experience to kind of lots of new smaller brands as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you've mentioned, you've worked across both sort of like legacy and challenger brands. And I was just wondering, in terms of like when you first step into a new brand, where do you start when it comes to building out a brand strategy?
I think the most important thing for me is understanding the brand values and their pillars. For me, they are like your guiding principle. They are your North Star. They should underpin every single business decision, whether that's strategic, creative, consumer facing. So in an ideal world, I go into a brand where those pillars have already been defined. And I think from there, when building out a strategy, it's seeing whether they're actually being lived and breathed across the business. I can't remember all of the brand values that I've worked at all the businesses. Some of them I can, others not so much, but it shows that the business probably wasn't living and breathing them. They sometimes feel like a bit of a tick box that you do, and sometimes kind of force from HR as metrics that you do at annual reviews and things like that. So I think it's really understanding and interrogating those pillars and those values and making sure that the team know them, that the consumer feels them, whether that's directly or indirectly. More often than not, though, they might not be created. So I think it's about listening. So trying to get that information from key stakeholders, listening to your customer, listening to the team, and trying to understand like what those key values are. And then when you're building out the strategy, it's making sure that every single decision, every single strategic pillar of that strategy links back to those values, because once you've got that foundation in place, the rest of the brand can kind of grow from there in a real credible and authentic way to who you are as a brand.
Yeah, no, completely agree. It's something that we talk about a lot in terms of starting with the why and the purpose. And I think that obviously really links back to the values as well. And you're right, I've been in many companies myself where they're just big black letters on a wall. I'm thinking about my House of Fraser days, and they'd be just in like the staff canteen, and it was like, what do these actually stand for? Like, you see them, but you don't actually know what you're meant to be doing as an employee to stand and live by these words that you see plastered everywhere. Just in terms of like brand stories, then, how quickly do you think you can tell if a brand story is like truly running through their product and not just their marketing? Going back to sort of like what you were saying around the values.
I think one of the ways that I think you can kind of tell it is asking yourself, like, could your team members or could your customer, probably more importantly, articulate who your brand is in like an elevator pitch? And it goes beyond just, we're a makeup brand that sells product. It's who you are, what you stand for, what your purpose is, and kind of how you're different from other brands as well. And I think if your customer base, your team can articulate that like cohesively with real clarity, and it feels really authentic in a way that, you know, I think if like everyone can say the same thing basically, and it has real cohesion across what everyone is saying about you, then you've probably in a good place that you've got a well-rounded brand. And I think quite often brands can feel quite functional, and that's where it's really hard for a consumer to articulate who that brand is and why they're different and why they should believe in them.
Do you think that's like becoming a bit more relevant now that, say, like LinkedIn is obviously it feels like a completely different platform to what it was like a few years ago, and we're seeing a lot more. I mean, employee content is happening all over the space. Like, we're seeing, you know, Primark employees on TikTok through to, you know, the employees in brands talking about the work that they're doing. Do you think that's becoming more relevant, that the employees really need to have that cohesive story now? And we're starting to see it more and more every day through the platforms and how they're talking about what they're doing and where they're working. I don't know if that makes sense, but I
think, yeah, employee generated content, is it EGC? Everyone calls it. It's like a new kind of, instead of UGC, EGC. I think it's going to be one of those things where it has to be done right, rather than it being, I think I've been in businesses already where I'm starting to see EGC being branded about. And I think the real way that a brand can be successful when it comes to that employee advocacy is if it's genuinely lived and breathed through the team, and it's not forced upon them to be like, you need to post on LinkedIn and you need to post about us. And I think sometimes the best cases of where that employee advocacy has shone through for me is where it almost hasn't been mandated by the brand. It's almost, you can imagine it's a member of the social team, or better if it's even not someone from the social team, kind of going, I kind of want to talk about the business. Is that allowed? It will obviously be done in a positive and sensitive way. And I think then it feels really, really genuine. And I think people build that real connection. Whereas when I think EGC is seen more as a tick box of, oh, can you all jump on LinkedIn and talk about us? Then I think it will lose that weight. But I do think employee advocacy is super important. And I think where in my career I've naturally kind of gravitated towards startups, I think in those early days of businesses, you're part of you feel like you're really part of making something. You're not coming in 10 years in where everything's established and you're kind of a small fish in a big pond. You really kind of hands-on experience. And I think one of the biggest challenges but opportunities for brands is to keep that employee advocacy alive, because if your employees aren't super passionate about you and living and breathing the brand and being your biggest advocates, then why should your customers care? If your own team don't really want to talk about you, then why should you expect a customer to? So I think it's a responsibility of the business and the culture and that team spirit. And again, coming down to those values, if everyone knows what you're working towards and what the direction is, then that kind of feeling should be palpable and that fire should be ignited pretty strongly.
Yeah. I mean, apart from the values, I mean, I think they're obviously the North Star, the foundation for all of this. How, like, have you seen any other ways that brands have really sort of got their employees behind them in a cool, you know, sort of like innovative ways? Or do you think it is just purely down to sort of like the recruitment process really, and kind of getting that bit right and getting them embedded in the values from day one? Or is it something that you can kind of, you know, turn around?
Yeah, I think culture is one of the most important things. I think, if it's quite a transactional role between you and your employees, if you come in, you do this job, you get paid, goodbye, then people it's a transactional relationship that you're going to get out of your employees. Whereas I think when that culture, like that onboarding process of really making that consumer, that not that consumer, making that employer know what their part within that business is and what the vision of the business is. So when I was at Charlotte Tilbury, the goal was always to be the number one beauty brand. We lived and breathed that. And I think they are one of the brands where I can remember what their values were, because every single meeting, every single decision was fundamentally underpinned by those four values that we had. And so I think that was a really good example of that, every single employee understanding what their part was. And we knew that we would get to that North Star of being the number one beauty brand. Years later, they absolutely are. And I genuinely think that's because there was this real momentum, and they call it like the magic of Charlotte Tilbury. And it does, like when you're in there, it feels almost cultish, but in a good way of like, we know what we're working towards and we are going to be bigger, bolder, brighter than any other brand out there. And so infused in every single decision. But you had like, they call it their start of a dream, their first week that you're onboarding, you're fully immersed in the product, the people, the culture, the value. So that really sets you up for success of what you know that you need to deliver within your role. And my start of a dream, I was with people from finance, from VM, from operations, etc. So even though we're all going into different avenues from there, that kind of employee advocacy started from day one, really.
Yeah, that's a great example. Love that. The Charlotte Tilbury magic. I love it. It's
Yeah.
great.
But the customer believes it as well. Like we all believe
Yeah.
it. And, everything that brand does, they kind of infuse that magic to the customer. So it's kind of really palpable within the brand.
Yeah, love it. And then just thinking about like, 'cause obviously Charlotte Tilbury, I mean, it is one of the biggest brands, but in terms of like some of the fast growth brands that you've worked with, or even just brands that you've seen, have you ever seen a brand sort of like compromise too much and lose like the love that they were building? And if so, what do you think were the things that went wrong?
I think the nature of startups, unfortunately, means that, and especially like the economic climate that we've been in the last, few years or longer, I think that the biggest thing that I have seen that compromises that kind of sustainability and that long-term growth is just making really short decisions. So it's focusing on those short wins. And I think again, it's really challenging every single decision. And don't get me wrong, you need to hit a number and you need to hit your KPIs. But I think sometimes what you see in kind of chasing a balance sheet or chasing kind of metrics that sometimes are just pulled together. I think sometimes you don't even interrogate, like, why are we challenging this metric? Like you need sales, absolutely. But sometimes you go, oh, we'll just send another email or we'll just do another piece of this activity, as opposed to going, is that chipping away or building? Because I think trust and loyalty within a brand is cumulative. So every decision that you make, every campaign, every collaboration, every consumer touch point either adds or takes away from it. So I think unless you as a brand and as a team are really confident in why you are doing a certain thing, and sometimes the money will win, or that the KPI of that decision will have to win. But I think if you're constantly chasing that short term, customers can see it. Like we've got to give them more credit sometimes than I think people do. So when it's like, oh, we listen to you and we're going to give you this discount at the end of the month, it's like, oh, you just are doing another sale in order to hit a revenue target. So I think it's just about being really purposeful with those decisions and making sure you're not compromising too much on those values, because once that trust has been eroded, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at it, how much media spend or influencer collaborations or whatever it might be, because you've already lost those building blocks in the early days. So I think it's that balance between being steadfast in your long-term vision and not making too many short-term wins that will eventually compromise the longevity of the brand.
Yeah, I love that point actually, though, about what you said around the consumers. And, I think over the years, I don't know how to word it. It's not that we didn't need to kind of like you said, we need to give them more credit because, a few years ago, they weren't thinking and sort of focusing on the things that they're thinking about now. And we are, we're both consumers as well. Like, we're so much savvier. We think about things so much differently now in terms of, the whole sort of social commerce space and what we want when we go into like a store and all of that stuff. And it'll be interesting to see what we're like in a couple of years' time, particularly with the Gen Alphas coming up and like obviously Gen Zs. And, we all want something so different. So I think it'll be a really interesting but a complex space for brands over the next few years from a consumer standpoint. Sorry, I went on a complete ramble there, but what do you think is a non-negotiable when it comes to building a brand designed for long-term love?
Yeah, I think it's, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I think it's really staying true to those, not even like it's staying true to your values and your principles, but I think it's really holding true that fundamental reason as to why you launched the brand or the product in the first place. And I think brands evolve, right? So, your consumer's going to change. And I think who you might think your brand is when you launch, it doesn't mean, like, people go through rebrands. And, I've been at brands before where they think their customer is one person and actually they're a completely different person. So you have to evolve your tone of voice and your creative and things to still try and attract the person that you want to, but also, stick true to the person and the consumer that's actually shopping with you. But I think it's so noisy out there. That I think really trying to remind yourself and the team as to why you are different and not getting too swayed by outside noise, because I think I've definitely been guilty of it in the past where you're like, oh God, Rory did that, or if I did that, we should do it. And actually, that's great that they did it. And one of the team at VIEVE was always like, I hate it when people say, look how amazing what they're doing is from a jealousy point of view. They're like, we do things that hopefully in their team, they're going to be saying, oh my God, VIEVE did that and how incredible. So I think just making sure that you are sticking true to who you are and taking inspiration from what's going on and evolving and adapting, but not sacrificing the fundamental core foundations of the brand. Because I think that's when a customer from day one goes, well, I bought into you because of this. And 3 years later, it's a completely different expression and a completely different narrative. And the team is always going to change. You're always going to have a new person that's going to be in marketing or in brand or in copy or whatever it might be. But you need to make sure that if you've got that solid foundation, it doesn't matter the new team members that are coming in to a consumer, it still feels like it's that same original vision that's being expressed to them.
Yeah, and I think I actually wrote something not as detailed and as good an answer of what you just said there, but I even wrote on a comment today on LinkedIn around, I think, again, that just in terms of like the digital landscape that we're in and brands, it goes back to what you were saying around brands sort of like looking at maybe what a competitor's doing or a brand that they aspire to. And it's like, yeah, we want to be doing that. And it's almost like we're kind of, I think a lot of brands feel there's a playbook for this, particularly on sort of social media and how to build a community and actually there isn't. It all comes back to exactly what you say about knowing your customer, your values, and what you stand for, and how does that translate into how do I then build a community? What do we do on socials? And it's funny that we're a lot of brands are sort of missing that now because it's just this rat race to kind of keep up. And, it's probably naturally going to happen because of like trends and algorithms and all of this stuff. But yeah, I think you're exactly right. It really does come back to just being able to stick to it and keeping that integrity. So it's so key. If I've got a random question, if you could ban one phrase or a mindset that fast growth brands lean on that actually kills brand love, what would it be?
I think probably, thinking kind of off the cuff here, but probably the influencers are the be all and end all of your success. And I think I was talking to someone about this the other day. I think the tide is going to change relatively quickly on that whole influencer piece. I don't know what's going to come next, but none of us saw TikTok come years ago and how that would change the landscape. And I think what's happening now is you need to kind of see influencers and that content creator piece in a multitude of ways. And I think quite often, I think there's a thinking in brands that the way that you're going to unlock success and you're going to unlock advocates and customers is through influencer talking about you. And I think there's two sides of influencers. You've either got the community of influencers that are just producing content, and you'll see there's their favorite moisturizer one week to a favorite moisturizer the next week to a favorite moisturizer the week after, and customers are like not being influenced as much anymore. And then you've got the other side of that, which is the influencers and content creators who will only back things that they genuinely believe in. And you're kind of doomed either way, because you've got to have an amazing product that the people that genuinely will only talk about products that they love, you've got to get it into their hands and you've got to want them to be able to talk about it. And if you go down the other route of just pure saturation, then you're probably not going to get the results that you need, because you've just got loads of people talking about the same product. And sometimes you're scrolling on TikTok where a product's just launched and I've heard the same script 17 times in a row. So you go, well, I know that these people don't genuinely love it. So I think one of the narratives that I think is we're having to diversify. And 3 or 4 years ago, you could have built a brand on an influencer strategy. And now it's much more about spotlighting those creators early on, the people that you can build the most authentic relationships with. Working at VIEVE, we had, from my side because I don't work with her anymore, but an incredible influencer manager who spotlighted talent right at the early doors and really nurtured those relationships, so that when they went from nano into a mid-tier creator, they valued VIEVE and they valued that the relationship was built. So I think that's one of the narratives of just, it can't just be transactional with content creators. There's a place for them and they're absolutely valuable, but they're not going to be the be all and end all of growing your business. And you also have to have dedicated resource that's going to nurture those relationships to have real-term success.
Yeah, that's a great answer. What were some of the ways, or could you give us a bit of an insight into some of the ways that, like, I appreciate that it wasn't necessarily your role there at the time, but what did they do to kind of nurture them from, one stage to the next, so that they do feel that brand sort of like love for you through every stage of like the creator's career?
I think it's genuinely having a human behind it and someone that's going to care about them. I always say that it shouldn't just be transactional between a content creator or an influencer. You as a brand and you as a person should be showing up at the moments that matter for them. So when they're not posting about you, are you liking their content? Are you commenting? If they've got married, are you saying congratulations? Are you responding to the moments which aren't about you? And I think what Lowry, who was the content manager, the influencer manager at VIEVE, did was really, like, she's just a lovely person that wants to build relationships with people. So she would spotlight talent quite early on. And I think the way that she always talks about thinking about influencers and thinking about creators is not necessarily about nano to mid. It's about what value and what purpose. You've got some people who might not be sales drivers and they might not have a huge following, but they create incredible content and that's beautiful and aesthetic, and you can do a spark ad with it, or you can repost their UGC on your channel. You then might have people that are really big names and they're there for brand awareness, but they're not going to convert and you might not use their content. And then you've got the other side of people that their content might not be amazing and they don't have huge brand awareness, but they are cash cows and they're revenue drivers. And I think it's recognizing what each of that value can be and what you can give back to them, because I think it's, not all brands have budget in order to be able to pay creators. But if you're working with someone from an affiliate point of view and they're a bit of a cash cow and they have real influence, then it's about unlocking a higher commission from them. If there's someone that loves creating content, invite them to your events and fuel them with opportunities where they can create content. So I think that was Lowry's amazing strength, is actually recognizing the value of each of the influencers, but also just building a real relationship with them where it doesn't just go, we're only going to show up every 3 months when we want to send you a PR mailer and follow up. It's about kind of always being present. And that requires a lot of time and a lot of resource. And you could go weeks of just talking to people and nothing coming from it. So it's quite a hard role, because there's bits that are really tangible in terms of affiliates and link clicks and all of that. But then there's a softer side, which is effectively relationship building. But when that person goes, hopefully does become big, and they went from 7,000 followers to 700, they're going to remember that brand that was advocating for them, sending them products, present and supporting their career in the early days, and not just jumping on them because they've now got 700,000 followers.
Yeah. Oh no, I absolutely love everything that you've just said there. It is high touch, it's high level, but 100% needed when it comes to sort of like keeping those relationships alive. And I love like the example of sort of like, you know, if they just got married, or is it their birthday, or like, and just those little surprise and delight moments where, you know, they're not expecting it, you're not asking for anything back in return, but it's just, you know, you wouldn't go on a dating app and just like, I don't know if this is even the right example to use, but it is about you've got to kind of like give and have that two-way relationship with someone. And I think when brands sort of say influencer marketing doesn't work, it's because they're not taking it as like this holistic approach and thinking about it the way that you've just described it, how, you know, creators and influencers at every level have a part to play in the marketing mix. And yeah, love that example. So great that brand is having a bit of a moment at the moment. Or should I say another moment? And I think, especially when it comes to community, and thankfully for us, advocacy is being talked about a lot more now as well. But some of it does feel still quite superficial. I think some of these words are becoming buzzwordy. What do you think is the most misunderstood part of brand building today?
I think internally at brands, it's that brand as a function isn't really needed. And, you know, for me, that's challenging because that is like my bread and butter. But I think, again, in this climate, you kind of have to look, when you're looking at team structures, you go, well, we need someone in finance. And if we sell product online, we need an e-commerce person. And if we're selling a product, we probably need customer care to answer responses. And then you've got your channel managers. And then brand, I think, as a function can feel sometimes like nice to have. But I always say that brand in itself is, as a function, is that seamless red thread that brings your purpose and your personality to the customer in a really cohesive way. So consumers don't engage with brands in silo. So take this journey, for example. So you might be scrolling on TikTok, because we've just been talking about, and an influencer has spoken about a brand and they tag that brand. So you click onto the brand's organic social and you go, I'm going to carry on scrolling. 3 days later, you get retargeted with a paid ad, and maybe there's an offer. So you click through to the website, and then you get a pop-up to sign up to an email, and then you go and shop a few days later. From a team point of view, that customer has touched the influencer manager, the organic social team, the paid social team or paid search, the digital team, and then the CRM or email team. So that's 5 different teams. And I think what's really important from a consumer standpoint, and for you to have success, is to make sure that every single one of those touch points is cohesive and that it feels unified under one voice and one vision. Because I've seen so many brands, and I've gone into brands before, where you go, but email's talking about this, and social's talking about this, and the site's talking about this, and none of it's syncing up. And I think the misconception is that actually brand is that function that ties all of that together. And I think that the most successful brands recognize that you need someone who is going to be that brand guardian. And it's a really tough role, because I always say I'm the most annoying person in a business, because I'm the person going, can we just know what you're doing? And it's not because I don't trust what you're doing or I don't think you're an expert. But I go, oh, that team's doing this, so maybe you might want to talk about that too. Or they've had this amazing idea, and I think that could sync up with this channel. And if you've never worked with anyone in brand before, it can be really frustrating, because you're just like, why is this person on my back all the time? But it's really to make sure that all of that hard work that going across the teams is being presented to a customer cohesively and seamlessly, so that that customer goes, oh, I kind of know what this brand is about. Because it takes repetition for a consumer to build trust in a brand. They're not just going to see one paid ad and be like, I'm going to buy from that immediately. Sometimes it happens, but rarely. So I think the biggest misconception is probably that brand just isn't a function that is necessarily needed. And it's one of the first things that can go and be sacrificed when brand people are having to scale back and teams are having to get scaled back. But I think when you've got really a strong brand at the hands of someone who is really protecting it at all costs, then that's going to enhance that consumer experience and build on that advocacy and build on that trust.
Yeah, that's really insightful. I love that example. And I think we need to take that and use that across all of our socials and get it really out there, because I think it's really insightful how you've described that as a function. As I mentioned at this sort of like what I just said around community, obviously having a moment, and what I feel is becoming more and more of a buzzword. I mean, obviously you've led global brand marketing and obviously you're consulting now. When a CMO or a founder says, like, we want to create a community, what do you ask them first to know whether they really mean it? Because I think the word community is being massively diluted as well.
Yeah, I think there's some, completely agree. And I think there's some really important questions that need to be asked. I think the first one is what is your definition of community? Because I've worked in brands where community is your customer, it's your email database, it's your loyalty program, it's high spend customers, it's nano creators, it's all of the above or parts of them. So I think it's just actually defining what does community mean for you. I think the second question is why. I don't think every brand needs to have a community, but like you said, it's a buzzword that is thrown around everywhere now, that I think people go, we need a community. So it's kind of challenging. Why do you want one, or why do you think you're in a position to have one? I think arguably the most important question is, what are you willing to do or give up potentially in order to have a community? Because community isn't just starting a conversation, which people think is a broadcast channel. We're just going to invite you to a broadcast channel and broadcast messaging out to you. And it's also not just replying to inbound comments or DMs. It has to be a two-way dialogue. And that's not to say that you have to take on you don't have to change things based on every single thing your community is feeding back to you. And again, if you fundamentally don't believe in it, and it financially doesn't make sense, logistically doesn't make sense, it doesn't align with one of your core values, you don't have to do it. But you also have to then, if you're listening to your community and inviting that conversation, and you're not going to take on board what they're saying, then you have to go back to them and tell them that you're not going to do it and why. So you either have to be committed to changing things about your business, and that could be taking on feedback about a product and changing the formula. That can be really, really costly. Or it could be changing your entire loyalty program if your community is going, this isn't working for us and we don't like it. Or if you're not willing to make those changes, it's going, we hear you, we know it's important to you, we cannot do it, but here is why. And I think that requires some real decision making. It requires, a commitment from the team that if we're opening up this two-way dialogue, that we are going to listen and we're going to respond. And it's also not just saying the short-term wins. I think it's like, oh, my community said that they would like an early access to a product, so we did that and we listened to our community. Are you doing the things that take a really long time and are harder to action? So you need to make sure that you're open to what they're going to tell you, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that you're going to have a team that's going to do this, because it's a bit like that Lowry piece that we're talking about from an influencer point of view. It requires someone that is going to build those connections, that's going to host events or like discuss things in forums or lead focus groups and be talking to that community, whatever your definition of that is, in day out. And so you need a resource, better yet, a team that's going to be able to do that. If you are 3 people in a business and your CMO is going, we need a community, but we're not going to hire and we're not going to really do anything about it, then you're probably not right to have a community. And that just one of the focuses of the business.
Yeah, great answer. I think you're right. I think community, the definition means something different to a lot of people. I mean, what even is community now? Like, if you were to describe it, what would it be?
Yeah, but again, it's really down to every single and what their definition of it is. I think, if I'm really honest with myself, are there any brands that I genuinely feel like I am part of a community? Probably not. And I engage with brands in probably a different way than most people do, even though I'm in brand and kind of see it from more of an objective point of view. But I think it's, to each brand, it's finding those people that are genuinely passionate about you. And I always, like, one of the great things at VIEVE, I genuinely think VIEVE, due to Jamie and kind of her, at least initially down to Jamie Genevieve's kind of own following and own community, what I love about them is they facilitate the conversation, but actually the community does half the work. So our customer care team couldn't respond to comments quick enough, because by the time someone had gone, oh, does this product work in this way? Or how should I use this? You've got 10 comments from different really passionate customers who are responding, and we kind of knew who our we knew our customers by name more so sometimes than we did like influencers, because we were these real passionate fans that probably don't fit into any of those three buckets that we discussed about from an influencer point of view, but they're the people that will respond to every single post. They will be the first person to buy a ticket when you do a masterclass. They will be buying every single product on the early access wait list, and they're the people that you need to be nurturing. So for me, that's kind of who your core community members are, is like they have influence, but over you as a brand, because they're showing up and they're being present, or over their friends and family. But that's one definition for VIEVE. For another brand, the definition might be completely different. So I think it's having real clarity from leadership, or from the function itself, as to what does community mean to you before you even think about building one.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. I think it also comes down, like, I don't think I could say I'm part of someone's community, and that's actually how we sometimes talk about it here at Brand Advocacy, in terms of, well, would anyone say they're part of our community? No. Like, if we were to walk into a room at an event and go, are you part of the Building Brand Advocacy community? They'd be like, no. Like, and that's, yeah, I think that's how I kind of not define it, but that's where I would want to start. Like, do they feel like they're actually part of something that we're doing? I just want to switch back to some of when you were talking about the insights that you get from like the community and the customers. And I think a lot of brands talk about being customer centric and listening and having this two-way dialogue, but I don't think there's only so many brands that I can think of that I feel like truly listen to what their customers and community are saying. I just want to go back to what you were saying around sort of like customer insights, and sort of like how you get that from your community as well. Because I think a lot of brands talk about being customer centric, and there's only so many brands that I can think of now that are actually truly listening and actually actively doing something with it. But what have you seen work when it comes to turning customer insight into brand truth? And who do you think does this really well at the moment?
So I'm actually working on a brand at the moment, which they are incredible, and they were literally born from customer insights. They're called Decipher. And there's a big piece of work. What you see from Decipher now is not what you will see in the future. The proposition, absolutely, but there's one of the reasons I'm with the brand is there's a kind of bit of an evolution happening. But they're effectively an AI-powered beauty brand, and the whole brand was built from consumer insight. So the two founders basically got frustrated with traditional beauty. So we had the Fenty effect a few years ago, but at best you might have 40 foundations in a range. They're not inclusive. They say they're inclusive, but even like you or me could be probably lucky enough to find a shade that works, but it's probably not 100% right. And having to compromise on undertone, overtone ever so slightly. We did a customer survey recently when 97% of people have worn the wrong foundation shade. They've just had to make it work. Born from that frustration of that consumer insight of why are we having to kind of just fit people in between numbers between 1 and 20, 1 and 40 at best, they changed the game. So they literally created an AI tool, and every single foundation is made on order to that person's skin tone. So it's completely bespoke and made to you. But they took it one step further, because consumer insight was telling them, well, if it's a matte foundation with a full coverage finish and I'm a radiant finish foundation wearer and I like a lighter coverage, great, I've got my shade, but now the formula isn't right for me in terms of finish or coverage. So you can now bespoke your finish and your coverage as well as the shade. And I think that kind of feedback loop is something that Decipher have all the time. So whenever there's reformulations, they go back to their customer and bring them on that journey. But not only the customers that are buying the product, they actively go to the customers that weren't satisfied the first time with the finish, the coverage, the shade, whatever it might be. And they go, we didn't get it right, but we're reworking on something now. We want you to try it. And I think that's quite rare because that customer could be lost in any other brand. Whereas for Decipher, they're like, how can I bring them back? And again, it goes back to that community piece. If they've genuinely actively listened to what their feedback is. And I think because the brand was born from consumer insight and wanting to put the customer first, it's not just you're going to settle for a product that is off the shelf. We are creating something bespoke for you that not only does a customer see themselves in the product because it is literally made for them, they see themselves in how the brand is developed because they're always seeking that feedback and always asking the community and the consumer what they think. So I've never seen a brand that I've worked on personally that actively invites experts, influencers, customers into the product development side of things. And that will always be something that's fundamental to Decipher because the brand was literally born from that consumer insight. So I think they are a brand that are small now. Not only are what they're doing kind of game changing and revolutionary, but I think that customer dialogue that they really want to hold true at every single step of the journey is something that's going to set them up for really long-term success.
Wow, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Have they been launched long?
Yeah, a few years. So it's one of those things that I think that the biggest challenge with Decipher is it sounds too good to be true. And people don't, sure, yeah, of course. And I think sadly there's other brands out there that present that they do what Decipher does, and they don't. They're a 50 shade foundation range that actually doesn't bespoke foundations. And I think people go, is it really going to work? Is it right for me? But also what I love about Decipher is they have something called a perfect match promise because they know that technology can only take you so far and there is going to be error. So if you're not happy, they'll return it completely free of charge. Like you'll exchange it free of charge and you'll get to kind of rematch your shade. And then you've got a human on the other side of it who is working with you, tweaking it. Is it the coverage you didn't like? Is it the finish? Is it the shade? And you then get to kind of make that adapt free of charge. So I think that's probably the biggest barrier to Decipher is proofing it because it sounds too good to be true. But again, we've got amazing customers that on any paid ads, whenever anyone's like, yeah, sure, it's going to do that, they're like, no, it does. And they jump into the comment section before we're even able to as well.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I love it. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to switch gears slightly. I'm going to mention a past podcast guest, Beth Thomas, who is currently our most listened to episode ever, which she doesn't believe me when I tell her this. But is this Beth someone that you've worked with before?
Yes, me and Beth together years ago at Glossybox, and she actually introduced me to Lowry, who I was mentioning earlier. All three of us are Welsh, so it's not just a Welsh thing where kind of arming together. But I worked with Beth at Birchbox. Too many boxes. I worked with Beth at Birchbox years ago, and we are still very good friends now.
Okay, so Beth shouted you out on LinkedIn as a person who asks all the right questions to grow and successfully lead a team. I want to know, what are the questions marketers aren't asking enough?
Honestly, why? And I think when Beth very graciously and kindly said that comment, I think I replied to it saying, why can be seen as a really confrontational question, even though it's not intended to be. And it has to be done with grace and decorum and are sensitively, absolutely. But I think the times that I've had pushback from asking why, and that could be loads of different whys. Why are we doing this? The obvious one, but why are we approaching it in this way? Why are we doing it now? Why would a customer care about it? I think it's just interrogating what we do as a business. And the times that I've had pushback from asking why is probably because the people in the room can't answer that question. And I always say, everyone in the room can answer that question. All asking why is giving us clarity. It's not done to be like, why are we doing this? We shouldn't do it. It's just going, so why? Because we should all be able to answer that question. And if everyone in the room can answer it, we're probably doing the right thing and we're on track. But what I find more often than not is people go, oh, yeah, we just got told we had to do that, so we're doing it. And they don't really challenge positively why things are happening in the way that they are, or if we could do things better. Sometimes it's we need to get from A to B, so we're going to go the linear route. Whereas sometimes just thinking about it slightly differently or focusing on things in a slightly different way. It might not be the quickest way of getting there, but it's going to have more impact, or it's going to have better ROI, whatever it might be. And I think good marketing doesn't come from having the answers, it comes from asking the right questions. And so I think all you're doing when you are getting clarity from a question is making sure that everyone's on the same page, that you're focusing, I guess, more on impact rather than an output. Because I think when you just get given a task and you just do it, you're focused on just delivering the task. Whereas when you interrogate why, you're focused on it challenges you to think about the output. Are we doing this in the best way? Are we bringing the right people on board? Are we launching it at the right time? And it makes you think about whether the output of it is going to be better than if we just did it. So the biggest question I think marketers can ask, or anyone really in a business can ask, is just why. And as a leader, for me, I love when someone asks me that, because it makes me go, oh, actually, do I know why we're doing this? Or can I confidently answer that question? And then you've got metrics. If you can say why we're doing it, then you've probably got KPIs and metrics that you can measure success from. If you can't answer that question, then it probably means that you don't have real clarity or direction as to why you're making a business decision, which makes it really hard to assess whether it was a good or a bad thing in the end.
I love that. I'm going to start asking why a lot more.
Yeah, it can't just be like, why? I think, and that's, I think just, us thinking about why we're doing things a bit more. I feel like I've said why about 400 times. So,
Yeah.
please.
I love it though. I love it. Right. I'm going to end on one of our favorite questions, Coryn, which is, how do you build brand advocacy?
So for me, it really starts with the team. So whenever I'm going into a team or I'm immersed in a team, it's really with that team. I remember Camilla Craven, who I work with at Charlotte Tilbury, always said advocacy starts at home. And it's something that I've taken with me to every single business that I have worked with. So thank you, Camilla, for that soundbite. And she genuinely believes it, and I do too. And I think it kind of goes back to that point we we're discussing at the beginning about that fire that the team has. I think, I said it before, but if you as a team aren't passionate about what you were doing, if you're not waxing lyrical from the rooftops about your brand or your product, or so passionate to be working in the team or for the brand, then I think you really have to ask yourselves, why would a customer? If you're expecting your customers want to believe in a brand and buy into brands that they've got an emotional connection with, that makes them feel inspired, or they learn from, or it's fitting a purpose in their life, they want that emotional connection more so than ever. And I think if you as a team aren't passionate about the brand, then there's no reason why your customers should be. And I think if you have that kind of passion, it's really it's almost contagious, right? So I think if all of your team are talking about you, and that's where you don't have to do EGC, you don't have to do a directive to be like, can everyone talk about LinkedIn? They should be doing it because they love you so much. They should be. All of my friends, their whole makeup bag now is VIEVE, because I was like, the product's incredible and you need it. So it just shows when you're passionate about a brand, it has this kind of ripple effect onto customers. So the biggest way that I build a brand is by that kind of advocacy piece, and making sure that all the team are living and breathing the brand every single day and are genuinely passionate about it. And if they're not, I think there's a question of, are they right? Are they the right fit for that brand? Or if your own team aren't passionate about you, then you're probably not doing something right. In which case, just to tie it all up, you can go back to those brand values and making sure that you are being purposeful and kind of staying true to your core.
Yeah. Two things there as well. I just want to shout out Camilla Craven, the Queen of Advocacy,
Absolutely,
and the VIEVE primer, the best primer I've ever used. So
literally, and it is like, the product is amazing, the team are incredible there. So it's like the easiest brand to be advocating for. And I'm really lucky, like being in brand, I have to be passionate about the brands that I'm working for. Like, I am the brand guardian at the end of the day. That is my role. So I really cannot work for brands that I don't genuinely love and believe in. But that's easier for me than if you're someone that's just working in finance. That sometimes can be a bit more of a functional or a transactional role. So I think the sign of a really good brand is when teams that aren't living and breathing like marketing or social or whatever it might be are still super, super passionate And Charlotte Tilbury and VIEVE are the two strongest kind of examples of that I've ever had in my career.
Brilliant. Coryn, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. If anyone wanted to get in touch with you, where would be the best place?
LinkedIn. So I've got a very unusual name. So there is only one of me, I think, in the world. So yeah, Coryn Brisbane, and you can find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I loved it.
Me too. Thank you so much.
That was another episode of Building Brand Advocacy, the world's top brand building podcast. To find out more about building brand advocacy and how this podcast is part of a bigger plan for our brand building cookbook, then make sure to search for Building Brand Advocacy in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else that podcasts are found, and make sure that you click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks to Duel for sponsoring. To find out more, go to www.duel.tech, that's duel.tech. And on behalf of the team here at Building Brand Advocacy, thanks for listening.